food. Thank you. I'm Dr. Diane Mueller, and I have with me Miles Nichols. We are both part of the Progressive Health Center that you've probably seen around here today. And we're also in private practice. We have a private practice just down the road in Centennial, and we're also setting up a second practice in Boulder, Colorado. So I will introduce Miles, and I will let him introduce me. Miles Nichols is a Master's of Science in Oriental Medicine. He's a licensed acupuncturist, and he also is certified in hypnosis, as well as many other energy types of medicine. So we are excited to be here and share our knowledge as functional medicine practitioners about nutrition and superfoods and what we can be doing on a day-to-day basis to make good choices about our life and how we can incorporate good foods into our body without just relying on supplements and pills and these sorts of things. So excited to have you all here, and here's Miles.
Thanks so much. This is Dr. Diane Mueller, and she's a naturopathic physician and naturopathic doctor and licensed acupuncturist. And she is also been practicing for several years in this area, and she offers nutrition and lifestyle consultations, and both of us have a passion for really investigating anything and everything related to health and spirituality. So we have dedicated our lives to really understanding very simple, practical tools and techniques that people can implement in their lives to make better nutritional choices, to make lifestyle choices that help to have resiliency, and to help people to really grow and evolve spiritually. So we'll begin just by describing a little bit about why we're doing what we're doing, what got us inspired here, and then we'll tell you about superfoods.
So my inspiration just came at the root from growing up and from having my own health problems, which were just IBS and depression, and working through fixing this and working with doctors and nutritionists and these sorts of things. And what my own journey to my wellness realized for me, what I realized out of this was that the complementary approach to medicine and healthcare is just extremely important. And I think it's a mission of ours to really bring this to people, to bring this education to people, and that it's more than just one modality that we really need, that what we eat and what we do on a day-to-day basis really does make a difference in how we feel, and that in medicine we get the best approach when we aren't talking about this as an alternative to this, but we really realize that in complementary care, it is just that. It's that all these different pieces fit together really nicely, and it's important for us to utilize as many different modalities and tools as somebody needs to really give the best care to everybody. So it really was fueled by my own search for my own healing that led me down this path.
And my story began when I was 15 years old, and at that time my father passed away suddenly and unexpectedly from a heart attack. And he was a medical doctor, and he was also a politician, and he did such amazing and inspiring work in the world. He was a wonderful man, and he helped so many underprivileged people to get health care. He worked on an initiative in Arizona called the Healthy Arizona Initiative that took tobacco and lottery tax money and put it into a pool that offered health care to people who fell below the poverty line but were ineligible for welfare. And he did many things to help underprivileged people have access to resources. And it was deeply inspiring for me to see him touch so many people's lives. So when he passed on suddenly and unexpectedly, I had this experience where I was able to deeply tune into his essence. Something that I felt really connected with him, though his physical body was gone. I had this deep inspiration that there's something more than I'm really seeing on the surface. And I began to become very interested in what is the essence of a person that's beyond the physical body. Of course, I believe the physical body is really important, and I miss him tremendously. So I also wanted to learn, how can we protect and preserve the physical vehicle? So I became really, really interested in medicine and in spirituality. This fueled my real devotion to learning everything I can about how to maintain resiliency and how to also access a deeper level of what I believe is the core of what I'm interested in, which is to help to find a place of love for myself, love for others, a place of acceptance for what's happening in my and others' lives, and the ability to relate to life from that space of love. So by making positive choices in our lifestyle and nutritional choices gives us energy and gives us an ability to make it just a little bit easier to tune into this deeper essence of opening the heart, of cultivating love, and of relating to life from that space. So that's been my inspiration and why I've devoted my life to this work.
Okay, let's talk about some superfoods. So, the first thing to go over when we're talking about diet and nutrition is, I get asked all the time in my practice and when I lecture, what is the perfect diet? People hear about paleo, which is one of the hot topics right now. There was the blood type diet. There's been so many dietary patterns and formulas over the years that it can get really confusing. And the answer to this is that every person is going to need a particular dietary requirement. And every person is also going to have these dietary requirements change over one's lifetime. This can be just due to age, this can be to stress, this can be to whatever disease we're facing. But it's really, really important to realize that there's not just this one diet that is going to work for everybody. And it's really nice to be, working with people that can kind of look over this for us, because it's hard to sometimes know. So another huge point is how do we relate to food? And this is important to think about what is happening internally when we are sitting down and eating a meal. Are we relaxed? What else is going on when we're actually looking at a plate of food? So it's going to be important that when we sit down, that we actually are engaging the part of our nervous system that allows us to eat and to digest. And this is really, really simple. The two parts of our nervous system, one does not work. The sympathetic, the fight or flight, run from a tiger, evolutionary part of the nervous system, does not digest our food. It's the other part of our nervous system that's more in that restful state that allows our intestines to contract, that allows us to secrete things like stomach acid and enzymes, things that allow us to digest our food correctly. So sitting down and actually taking a few deep breaths before we eat can really allow us to activate that part of the nervous system that's going to help us secrete things like enzymes and stomach acid, which will help us digest our food in a much better way. So some of these simple tools, it's like, what are we doing when we're eating? Are we watching a stressful television show? Because that can raise the stress response in our body and really change how we digest food. If we're watching, say, something that's stressful versus, saying, watching TV and there's a comedy show on, when people ask me, can I eat food can I watch TV when I eat food? my biggest question is, what are we watching? How are we going to allow our body to get into this restful state to digest? So food hygiene is very, very, very important. Sitting down and having a relationship to our food is very, very important.
So the essence here of what we're speaking about is that everyone is unique. We're all individually going to respond to foods differently. So we can talk about superfoods, and we can talk about foods that are nutrient dense, and we can talk about things that may be helpful for people, but it's a may, and everyone is unique, and we need to understand that we all respond differently. So it's important that we each pay attention to how our body feels after we eat. A couple of hours later, we might get a sense for, oh, I have a little bit of distress when I ate that thing. Or we might feel energized and vital and ready to engage with life more fully. So let's pay attention to that, and let's be sure not to take these things too rigidly and say, oh, this is good for everyone should eat this because it's got lots of nutrients. It may be true for many people, but we need to really tune into our own experience.
So we use this word superfood, but what does that mean? So we have to think about a few different things about the definition of what a superfood is before we actually start talking about these foods. And the first thing to consider is a superfood has something that is a food that has a particular nutrient density. What does that mean? So in order to figure out what nutrient density means and why this is important in a superfood, we need to actually only consider foods that have certain requirements. And these requirements are that the vitamins, the minerals, the nutrients that are in them are agreed upon by most individuals in the nutrition and healthcare industry as the most important nutrients for us. So we're using this as a baseline. We're not including foods that have nutrients that are maybe very important, but in the grand scheme of things, not looked at by the professionals as saying the most widely used nutrients in our body. So very, very important there.
And another important factor is the bioavailability. A food could have so many wonderful nutrients, but if we can't absorb those nutrients, if we can't metabolize them, then they're not useful to our body. So it may be that there's a food that's rich in nutrients, but we're able to only get a small fraction of those nutrients that we can actually utilize. So we also need to consider bioavailability when we're looking at a superfood. And that's factored into these choices that we've made for the foods that we believe to be high on the nutritional nutrient density list. We also need to consider nutrient degradation. How quickly do the nutrients deteriorate out of the food? One example is broccoli. We all have heard that broccoli is a wonderful food with lots of nutrients. And it's true, it is. It happens, though, that the research supports that broccoli has these nutrients, yet that it deteriorates rather quickly. The respiration rate of broccoli is very fast, so within a week of it being picked, it's already lost a significant amount of those nutrients. So we have to consider how long those nutrients last and when we can, from picking, actually get it on the table and prepare it into our bodies.
And the other thing we need to consider here is just in science that we are constantly learning new things as far as foods, as far as nutrition, as far as really everything in health and medicine. And for the longest time, we thought that that eggs, for example, raised cholesterol. And recent research shows that in 70% of people, it does not actually raise cholesterol at all. In the other 30% of people, it does raise the LDLs, which are known as the bad cholesterol, but it also actually raises the HDLs, which are the good cholesterol. So this recent research is actually letting us know that cholesterol from egg, or that eggs do not raise cholesterol as we initially thought. So it's really important too that when we're looking at superfoods that we're also looking at the science and looking at the research and realizing that as we come out with more information, sometimes these things change. And that's very important for us to realize. So, here's a pop quiz for you guys. What do you think the number one superfood is that meets all these criteria? I hear kale, I heard French fries. And I appreciate the humor. Kale is a great guess, and kale certainly has many nutrients. And we could perhaps put it in a superfood lecture. I've definitely talked about kale in superfood lecture before, and we will actually talk about it in a little while. That's not the number one though. Quinoa is a good guess. Blueberries are a great guess. And interesting about blueberries is when we're talking about the nutrient degradation thing we were a little while ago, that we learned that it's with blueberries, as high a nutrition as they actually have higher nutrition from their availability and from their degradation standpoint when they are actually canned and they have those juices kind of percolating. So that's a pretty interesting fact too. Nuts are a good guess. Grapes. You guys are all mentioning some great foods, but I'm gonna shock you. You guys ready? We're gonna shock you. Okay, here we go. Organ meats. I know. Don't. Please let us keep talking. So yeah, organ meats, and in particular liver, and it's true. It's like we used to eat these foods, our ancestors did so long ago, and now because the taste is a little funny and the idea of eating organ meats is a little strange, we've kind of cut them out of our diet. But as far as what they contain and the nutritional value of them, it's kind of the best bang for the buck, so to speak.
It used to be that organ meats were highly prized, that our ancestors really considered them to be some of the most important parts of the animals to eat. Yet today it's quite the opposite. We consider, those are inferior, which luckily for us that means they're a little bit cheaper. For those who know. Yet we like these tasty cuts of meat. And we sort of, because of the strange flavors and the accessibility that we have to be able to choose, we sort of like to favor the cuts of meat that are a little more tasty. And so I would encourage us to consider maybe going on a little bit of an adventurous culinary experience at some point. And try some liver. See what that's like.
It's awful.
So I have a solution for us. And this actually was taught to me by Miles here. But what we can do is we can actually cut liver into tiny little pill-sized pieces and stick it in the freezer. And we learn that after 14 days of liver being in the freezer, any microbes, any bacteria, any parasites, anything that could be in that meat has been killed. So it's essentially like cooking it. And so that's the magic number. And so then you can just put it in your mouth like you would a supplement and chase it back with some water. And you have your liver in you, and you don't have to go through any of the taste. So I know this is shocking, but it's a pretty amazing food. So, question.
Number 2.
So I heard you say cow's brains. I'm not sure what the question was, so could you repeat that? Or I haven't seen cow's brains on the market, but has anybody else? Head cheese? Is that what we're calling? Okay.
Some areas of the world. I'm not sure how accessible it is here.
Question.
I'll take that one. So the question is, how do we recommend cooking liver? And so liver, I believe, it can be fairly tasty and at least not so bad if it's cooked properly. So what I like to do is I like to cut it into thin strips and saute it first with lots of onions and garlic and some good fat. I like ghee to cook with. And so some ghee or coconut oil with lots of onions and garlic, and then thin strips sauteed on both sides. And the B vitamins in liver are a little bit heat sensitive, so if you it can help if you don't overcook it, but it's not really necessary if you like it more well done. There are plenty of minerals that aren't heat sensitive, so it's still a very, very good food, even well done. So we're going to move on to the next food in our list. So number 2, we have eggs. So, it's interesting, I think, to a lot of people here that maybe we're not talking about any vegetables yet. We will. But these foods are very bioavailable and nutrient dense. They're easy to metabolize, which means the bioavailability is higher. So eggs are important because they have all 13 essential amino acids. They're full of a complete protein. The yolks contain an immense amount of nutrition. There was a time when a lot of people were discarding the yolks and just cooking the whites. And the whites are great protein. There's nothing wrong with the whites. The yolk, though, has some amazing nutrients in it. It's got taurine, especially if it's a little runny, if you like your eggs over easy, there's a little taurine in that yolk, which is a really important nutrient for the liver, for bile production. And we've got a question here.
I'm wondering if there's an ideal way to cook the eggs to maintain that nutrient density.
So the question is there an ideal way to cook the eggs to maintain the nutrient density? Well, by making the yolk a little runny, we get a little bit more nutrients. It's not a lot, again, it's going to be good no matter how it's cooked. You're going to get a lot of the nutrients anyway. We will get a few more nutrients if the yolk itself is left a little bit runny. So, over easy. One way I like to do is I like to fry the egg, and when I put the egg in and start it frying, when it's about halfway done, I put a little water in the pan, cover it, and let it steam the top of the egg. So the white gets cooked and the whole egg gets high enough temperature to be safe, and the yolk still is a little bit runny. So then choline is an amazing nutrient for the brain, and that's found in yolks also.
Choline is actually what makes our nerves fire. It's part of what allows our nerves to communicate to each other, which is hugely important since our nervous system is kind of what links our whole body together. So that's its ability to help with the brain and the nervous system, is because it just kind of allows all of our body to actually talk to one another. I think reiterating that white yolk thing is very important. Like the whites are where we have the protein, but the yolks are where we have the minerals. The yolks, for example, have a lot of calcium. So, this whole thing, now that we know that we don't have this cholesterol piece that's as much of a concern with eggs, and we're seeing that in the research, really, really important we're getting those yolks in too.
So I believe the question is that you have a chicken who's nervous and you want to know what to put in their feed to help the chicken to be less nervous. Okay, well, I can't really comment on that because I don't know what would make a chicken less nervous in the feed. But I can comment that... Oh, what other foods contain choline? Okay. Aside from eggs. Okay, so the question is, what foods aside from the eggs contain choline? I am going to go just segue for just a second and talk about if people do have chickens, if they're fed flax and if they're fed a lot of flax in the diet, the omega-3 content goes way up. So it's nice to feed them high omega-3 foods. And you'll see eggs in the supermarket now that say they're omega-3 eggs, and they contain a higher amount of omega-3 because they've fed the chickens flax seeds. But as far as other foods that contain choline, eggs are one of the best sources. There's soy lecithin, which has choline in it, but there's some problems with soy for people. It's one of the high allergen foods, and a lot of people are sensitive to soy, even if they don't, realize it. If it's not overt, it can still be subtle sensitivities. So that is one possibility, is soy lecithin.
Another idea is sunflower. So we can use sunflower lecithin as well for choline. So it's probably a safer bet than the soy, just because it's not so genetically modified. Okay, cold water fish. So this gets us to the conversation that Miles started as far as the omega-3s. And who here has heard of omega-3s? Most of us, right? So we know most of us know they generally do something great for our health. But the big point here in talking about omega-3s is really in talking about the omega-3 to 6 ratio. So foods that a lot of us eat a decent amount of, like nuts and a lot of our seed oils, have a huge amount of omega-6s in. So it's pretty easy for us to get enough omega-6s. And omega-6s are great for us. We do need them. The issue is that omega-3s need to be in a certain ratio with omega-6s for health. And this is for anti-inflammation, it's for prevention of cardiovascular disease. So the ratio that is optimal for omega-3s to omega-6s is a 1-to-1 ratio. The average American's ratio is between 10 to 1 to 20 to 1. Sometimes as high as 25 to 1.
And that's 20 omega-6 to every 1 omega-3.
Right, so a lot larger of the omega-6s. We see in the research that the cardiovascular risk with this ratio starts around a 6 to 1 of omega-6 to 3s. So we're really throwing this ratio off by all of the fats that we're eating that contain the omega-6s combined with the lack of omega-3s. So where do we get these omega-3s?
Fish, I heard fish. Well, we're talking here about cold water fish. Where else?
Flaxseed.
Flaxseed. Good. Anything else? So we have, what's that?
Corn-fed beef, or grass-fed beef.
Grass-fed beef. Very good. So we have sources of omega-3 include fish, flaxseed, and grass-fed beef. We also mentioned eggs being a potential source. Now, there's a difference between, when we talk about omega-3s, we have to talk about the type of omega-3. So there are EPAs and DHA and ALAs. Cold water fish have EPA and DHA. These are preformed and ready to go for our body. We take them in and they are easily metabolized. Something like flaxseed has ALAs. ALAs need to be converted by our liver into EPAs and DHAs. This process is fairly inefficient for most people. Can be 10% in someone who's very, very, very healthy, and it's usually less than that. So, cold water fish are an excellent source of omega-3 fatty acids, and the kind that's easily metabolizable. So there are certain fish that are higher than others. So we have listed here the highest sources. And those are salmon, sardines, mackerel, and herring. So these are great sources of omega-3 fatty acids. Now, a lot of people may have heard of fish oil, and that's popular. And that's also a great source of omega-3 fatty acids. There are some concerns with fish oil, though, that need to be addressed, which are that some of them are highly refined, some of them have PCBs, and some of them have mercury. So we have to be aware of that and choose good brands, or eat, even better, cold water fish, fresh. So those are going to be really helpful fish for a high omega-3 content, and 1 to 2 pounds a week can go a long way toward getting that ratio back in balance, together with reducing some of the seed oils, and those would be canola oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, as well as peanut oil. And if we reduce some of those high omega-6 oils and maybe choose the omega-6 oils that are really healthful, like olive oils, we'll get more into the fats later, but the combination of reducing some omega-6 and increasing through cold water fish will help to have that balance.
With the salmon, is your farm raised and wild salmon? And I understand the wild is better, but is farm raised that bad? So that's kind of all we have here.
The problem with farm raised is that you do typically see more of the environmental toxins inside of those. So there's also an in-between step, which is sustainably farmed. And we do have access to sustainably farmed fish and salmon here. And that provides much less of a toxic load and can be as acceptable as wild in some situations. Yeah, and it's really important to also emphasize like the potency of these fish as far as their omega-3s. Like tuna, in about a 4 ounce, in about a 4 ounce thing of salmon, we have about 2 grams of omega-3. In a 6 ounce piece of tuna, we have only about a half a gram. So this is why we included these fish in the superfoods, is because the amount of the omega-3s that we get per ounce really is substantially higher than a lot of other fishes. And not saying that there's not value in these other fish, because there is, but certainly in a higher amount in these cold water fish. Okay, so traditional fats. So we have ghee, coconut oil, avocado, and all these other ones we see here. It's important to talk about, when we talk about ghee, to talk about the grass-fed component, because when we're talking about the omega-3s, when we're talking about the true quality of good fats, we find that most in grass-fed. And that's also known as pastured. If you see that word pastured, that's what that means, not to be confused with pasteurized. Pasture just means that they've been eating grass. And we also should differentiate between grain-finished and grain-fed, are other terms you'll see. So basically, we are looking for cows that have eaten grass their whole way, that have been finished the whole way up till the point of slaughter with grass. So we want them to be grass finished.
We have a question. One more clarification before the question is that it's meat that you'll see the grass finished thing, because obviously for milk and butter and ghee, the cows just would be grass fed. What's the question? So ghee. The question is, what is ghee? Ghee is clarified butter. So where the saturated, some of the solids of the butter are removed. So it's a process of taking butter, simmering it for a prolonged period of time until the solids separate from the oil, clearing off those solids or filtering or straining out those solids and leaving the oil. Now, one advantage to ghee is that it's got a higher smoke point. So when we're talking about cooking with foods, butter will burn at a lower temperature than ghee. Ghee has a much higher smoke point, so it's easier to cook with. So these fats are some of the really great fats, and when we have grass-fed butter or ghee, it's going to help with the omega-3 ratio, and if we have ghee, it's a really good cooking oil because it's got a high smoke point. Coconut oil is great because it's medium-chain fatty acids, and these medium-chain fatty acids are found in adipose tissue, so they are generally shunted straight to the liver, and they produce a lot of energy. Fats in general produce energy over a prolonged period of time. They're slower burning than carbohydrates, and so we are able to have energy throughout the day when we include some healthy fats in our diet. Yep.
Question?
I thought lard went out of style like 30 years ago.
It did. It sure did. And margarine came in style. And I'm sorry. The question was that I thought lard went out of style several years ago, and so my response is that it certainly did. Just as margarine came in style and butter went out of style and these sorts of things. And that goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, as far as really learning that as we gain more information, some of the things that we once thought were true were not necessarily true anymore. And we need to keep moving to get through everything, but one point that I do want to mention is when we are talking about smoke point, the importance of when an oil or a butter is smoking is because smoke point is basically when the oil will turn bad, it'll turn rancid. It'll switch its chemical configuration, where instead of being good, it will turn into an oil that's actually inflammatory and destructive to our body. So really choosing oils that are important at particular temperatures and are used at particular temperatures is very important for us. Of all this list, the oil that has the highest smoke point is avocado. Avocado we can heat to 520 degrees roughly Fahrenheit. So when we're really using high heat, avocado is the one to look for. But watch the oil when you're cooking for it. Watch the oil when you're cooking with it, because if it starts smoking, that's your sign. And so you want to add your vegetables and do whatever you need to do to bring that temperature down before it actually gets smoking. Can you speak a tiny bit louder? About seawater? Not today. No.
So now we're going to talk about pastured, which means grass-fed, full-fat dairy. Now, you might be wondering, why are we saying full-fat dairy versus just any dairy? And that's a great question. There are a few reasons. We've discovered through that with a full fat content, there's less of an impact on the blood sugar, and blood sugar imbalance is a big concern in our world today. The fat has a slower metabolism rate, so that's one reason. And there have also been some studies that have shown that that skim and low-fat milk and dairy products are more associated with health concerns than full-fat dairy. And we could go into more details, but we're going to leave it at that for now. But we will be available later for questions. So. Yeah, so K2, vitamin K2 is found in pastured full-fat dairy, and especially grass-fed dairy is really important for that. And also grass-fed butter it's found in. And so vitamin K2 is a really important vitamin for bone health. And so a lot of us think bones, we think calcium. That's great, that's important. Vitamin K2 is also very important. And a lot of people are deficient in K2. So it's something that's really helpful to get in the diet, and grass-fed milk and dairy and butter can provide some K2 for us.
Okay, so bone broth. So back to that animal again. It's another place that we tend to go in cooking is just to eat the muscle meat. And this is great, and there's certainly great protein and nutrients in this. One of the issues becomes, though, is that muscle meat is very high in something known as methionine. And methionine is great for our body. Methionine helps our liver detox, for example. So it's very important that we have it. However, everything is always needs to be looked at in relationship to each other. And one of the nutrients that bones have that is so very important is glycine. And the methionine to glycine ratio is also imperative with liver detoxification. And as we metabolize, as our body breaks down the muscle meats, so the things that we're used to eating, the steak, the chicken breast, these sorts of things, it actually utilizes its supply of glycine. So we actually lower our glycine stores. So we need to replace this glycine because glycine is also essential for liver detoxification. It's also essential for our nervous system. Glycine is one of the things that keeps us calm, helps our nervous system to stay in its very calm state. So by eating the bones and drinking the bone broth and eating the marrow that contains a lot of glycine, we're able to restore this methionine-glycine ratio, and we really see a lot of health benefits with this.
Now we're getting to the dark leafy greens. So, of course, kale is one of these. And there are enormous amounts of nutrients in dark leafy greens. You know, we highly encourage eating plenty of dark leafy greens. The nutrient density, the reason they're here on the list is just because these other foods have such high bioavailability, they're easy to metabolize, but we really want to emphasize dark leafy greens are excellent foods to eat. So, of the dark leafy greens, the colors are important. The darker the green and the reds and the purples are really high in phytonutrients. Phytonutrients are only found in plants, so phyto is unique to plants. We're not going to find them in animal food. So it's really important, and these are great sources of them. So you can see a list of some of the nutrients that you'll see in kale. And then fermented foods, full of probiotics. We really are, the gut microbiome is an incredibly interesting topic, and it's gaining more and more attention in the scientific community because of how important it is and how it relates to everything, our immunity, our whole life experience. So fermented foods are going to be full of probiotics. They're going to help to balance our microbiome and help to get it closer to where it might have been some years before or with a healthy diet.
Okay, seaweed. So we will talk about the sea a little bit. So seaweed is rich in all of these things that you see here. Its effect on conditions like blood pressure and allergies and fibromyalgia is due to these nutrients. You know, one of the things it is most known for is its iodine content. And we certainly tend to see iodine deficiency in this culture. And it's a great way of getting iodine in without having to use iodinized salt, which has been stripped of its other minerals and bleached and these sorts of things. So also looking at, vitamins like all these B vitamins. B vitamins help our metabolism. They basically help us digest food and turn apple into energy.
So, to recap briefly, we've got a lot of foods here that are going to be highly nutrient dense and bioavailable. We also want to remind you to really pay attention to the fact that your body is unique and that everyone is going to interact with and relate to these foods in different ways. Yes, we can look at how much iron and B vitamins and C vitamins are in different foods, Yet the relationship that we have individually with what's going on is very unique. So we want to always look at the big picture. How are we relating to our food that we're eating? Are we relaxed as we're eating? Do we take time? Do we have fun and enjoy the food? These are important considerations. So we're going to be available afterwards. We'll be in the back corner over there by the prevent sign later if you want to go find us and ask any more detailed questions. We're at time now. We thank you so much for your attention and your willingness to engage with this material. It's been an honor and pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.